The studio felt unusually bright that morning on Good Morning America, the kind of brightness that makes everything appear more dramatic than it should. Denzel Washington sat comfortably in his chair, dressed in a clean navy suit, calm and focused as he prepared to talk about a film he had spent years shaping. Before we begin, tell us where are you watching from, also subscribe. It was supposed to be an easy promotional stop, nothing intense, nothing controversial, just a simple conversation about storytelling and passion. Michael Strahan, however, seemed to be in a different mood. From the moment the cameras went live, something in his voice carried a hint of boredom, as if he'd already decided the interview wasn't worth his effort. His first question landed with a flat thud. "So, Denzel, another movie. What makes this one any different?" The tone wasn't curious. It was dismissive, the kind of tone that suggests the answer doesn't matter. Still, Denzel answered with patience. He started to explain the emotional heart of the project. A father, a son, years of distance, the complicated path toward redemption. But before he could finish, Strahan cut in with a quick wave of his hand. Right, so another drama. You do a lot of those." The room shifted. A few crew members glanced at each other. Denzel's smile faded just slightly, though he kept his posture relaxed. "I make films that say something," he replied evenly. "Stories that matter." Strahan leaned back, smirking like he'd been waiting for that line. "Sure, but don't you ever get tired of being so serious all the time? I mean, how many heavy films can one guy make before it all feels the same?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. Denzel didn't snap back. He didn't raise his voice. He simply adjusted himself in his seat and answered with the same steady professionalism he always carried. But Strahan wasn't interested in discussion. He was hunting for a reaction. He pressed again. "Come on, man, be honest. Younger audiences aren't exactly lining up for your kind of movies anymore. Doesn't that bother you?" Denzel paused, not out of uncertainty, but to maintain control. "Younger audiences appreciate quality. I give them that." Strahan laughed outright, a sharp, dismissive sound that echoed off the set walls. "Quality or predictability? Because your last few films didn't exactly blow up the box office." This wasn't banter anymore. It wasn't even disguised as a challenging interview. It was disrespect presented as entertainment, and it hung heavily in the air. Denzel sat up straighter, voice low but clear. "Success isn't measured only in ticket sales." "Oh, please," Strahan shot back, shaking his head. "That's what people say when their movies underperform." A silence rolled across the studio. No one breathed. Even the cameras seemed unsure whether to keep rolling. Strahan continued as if he hadn't noticed the tension, or maybe he had, and that was the point. "Look, man, I'm just telling you the truth. There's a new generation now. New stars, new energy. Maybe it's time to step aside a little. You had your moment." That line landed like a punch neither the audience nor the crew expected. Denzel repeated the phrase slowly, not to question it, but to highlight how casually cruel it was. "My time has passed." Strahan nodded, missing or ignoring the weight behind the words. "It happens to everyone. No shame in it." Denzel's expression shifted. Not anger, not shock, something quieter and sharper. Clarity, the kind that arrives when someone realizes a line has been crossed beyond repair. He looked directly at Strahan. "Tell me, Michael, how long have you been hosting?" Thrown off by the sudden pivot, Strahan blinked. "A few years. Why?" "In those few years," Denzel said, "have you learned anything about respecting your guests?" The smirk vanished. "Hey, come on, I'm just having a conversation." "No, you're performing." Denzel's voice never rose, but his words landed with absolute precision. "You're trying to provoke me. You're not asking questions. You're taking shots." Strahan tried to laugh it off, but it rang hollow. "Man, you're being sensitive." Denzel didn't flinch. "You made this personal. From the moment you opened your mouth, you weren't interested in the film. I doubt you even know what it's about. You came here to push a narrative that tears me down." The studio was silent again. This wasn't loud conflict, it was something heavier. A man calmly addressing disrespect with unshakable dignity. Strahan attempted a half-hearted apology, something vague and rushed, hoping to regain control, but Denzel didn't let it slide. "No, that's not an apology, that's damage control." Every word was steady, controlled, precise. It was the first moment where the power dynamic visibly shifted. Strahan's confidence drained, replaced by unease. Denzel sat back slightly, the picture of composed strength. "You asked me about relevance, legacy, whether I mattered to audiences. Let me make something clear. Relevance isn't about noise. It's about integrity." The cameras kept rolling, the crew kept watching, and Strahan had no idea how badly things were about to unravel. Strahan shifted in his chair, clearly rattled but trying hard not to show it. The tension on set had grown so thick it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Denzel wasn't raising his voice or creating theatrics. Instead, he delivered quiet truth with the precision of a scalpel, and that made every word cut deeper. Strahan attempted to regain footing. Look, Denzel, I'm just doing my job, asking the tough questions. That's what people expect. Denzel tilted his head slightly. Tough questions, or disrespect disguised as journalism? For a moment, Strahan had no answer. His eyes darted toward the producer standing behind the cameras, as if hoping for a cue card that could save him. None came. They were just as stunned as everyone else. Denzel leaned forward slightly, not aggressively, but with absolute purpose. There's a difference between challenging someone and undermining them. You know that, right? Strahan forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Man, you're acting like I attacked you. You did attack me, Denzel replied, calm as ever. Not with your tone, but with your intention. Every question you asked was meant to belittle, not enlighten. No, that's not. It is, Denzel said, cutting him off for the first time in the entire interview. His voice was low, controlled, and somehow more powerful than shouting could ever be. You invited me onto your platform and acted like my entire career is some tired routine, like I've somehow overstayed my welcome. Strahan's jaw tightened. That's not what I said. You implied it, Denzel corrected. An implication can be louder than words. The crew exchanged wide-eyed looks. This wasn't a celebrity meltdown. This wasn't ego. It was accountability. A mirror held up in real time. Strahan straightened his posture, trying to recover a sense of authority. Okay then, let's talk about the movie. That's why you're here, right? Denzel shook his head slowly. No, you don't get to pivot now. You had several opportunities to ask about the film. Instead, you chose to mock my work, my choices, my career. You didn't want a real conversation. He paused, letting the silence emphasize his next words. You wanted a moment. Strahan blinked, visibly stung. That's not fair. Is it not? Denzel asked. Because from where I'm sitting, fairness left the room the moment you decided being condescending would make good TV. Strahan swallowed, his confidence unraveling. He was used to controlling the flow of conversations, steering guests into the rhythm he wanted, but Denzel refused to play along. The legendary actor continued, his tone steady but unmistakably firm. You think people want drama, conflict for the sake of views, maybe some do, but most people can tell the difference between honesty and disrespect. Strahan opened his mouth, but no words came out. So let me tell you something, Denzel said quietly. Respect isn't optional, not in life, not in art, and not on your show. The studio fell completely silent, then Strahan tried a new tactic, minimizing. Denzel, man, you're blowing this out of proportion. Denzel's eyes sharpened. I'm responding appropriately. You made this personal. You questioned my relevance, my connection with audiences, my contribution to cinema. You laughed at my work, and you expect me to sit here and smile through it? Strahan's voice cracked slightly. I didn't mean it like that. It doesn't matter how you meant it, Denzel replied. It matters what you did. For the first time all morning, Strahan looked genuinely embarrassed. His shoulders shifted downward as he exhaled, the weight of the moment finally catching up to him. Denzel didn't gloat. He didn't push the advantage. He simply continued with quiet clarity. I didn't come here for this. I came to talk about the story I've poured myself into, but you didn't want that. You wanted to chip at my legacy. Strahan finally whispered, I wasn't trying to tear you down. You were, Denzel said plainly. And now you're trying to retreat because the consequences are uncomfortable. The cameras kept rolling. Millions of viewers were witnessing the unraveling of an interview that had drifted far from the path of professionalism. Denzel reached up and touched his lapel microphone. The movement was small, but it sent a shock through the room. Strahan's eyes widened. Wait, what are you doing? I'm ending this, Denzel said, his voice soft but absolute. There's no point staying when respect isn't part of the equation. Strahan stood abruptly, panic finally breaking through his polished TV host exterior. Denzel, come on, don't walk out. We can fix this. Let's start over. Denzel held his gaze. A restart doesn't erase intention, and an apology given only because the cameras are watching isn't real. Strahan looked helpless. Please, man, you're making me look bad. Denzel's response cut through the room like quiet quiet thunder. "No, you did that. I'm just refusing to clean it up for you." He unclipped the microphone, placed it gently on the chair, and stood. Every movement radiated control, not anger, not ego, just pure, unwavering self-respect. Strahan tried once more, reaching out like he could physically pull the moment back from disaster. "Denzel, don't do this!" Denzel stepped away from the touch. "I'm not doing anything. I'm leaving a situation you created." He took a slow step back. That's the difference between us today. You think this is about ratings. I know this is about dignity. With that, Denzel turned toward the edge of the set, and the world held its breath. Denzel took his first steps toward the edge of the set, and the atmosphere behind him tightened like a pulled wire. No one moved. No one whispered. No one dared breathe too loudly. Even the camera operators, trained to stay steady under any circumstance, seemed frozen in place. Each step he took felt deliberate, not rushed or angry, but grounded in the calm certainty of a man who knew exactly what he was doing and why. Behind him, Strahan's voice cracked as he tried to salvage the moment. "Denzel, seriously, don't leave. We can turn this around. Just sit back down and we'll reset." His words echoed across the studio, but there was desperation in them now. The strained tone of someone who had expected control and suddenly realized he'd lost all of it. Denzel turned slightly, just enough to look back at Strahan without fully facing him. His posture stayed relaxed, but his eyes held an unmistakable firmness. "Michael, this isn't something you can reset. You can't rewind intention. You can't undo disrespect with a quick commercial break and a smile." Strahan took a hesitant step forward, his entire demeanor unraveling. "I wasn't trying to disrespect you. You're twisting my words." Denzel shook his head. "I'm repeating them." That simple clarification hit harder than any anger could have. Strahan lowered his gaze for a moment, as if the realization finally reached him, but then he tried again, clinging to the last remnants of control. "You leaving like this, it's just going to make things worse. People are going to think—" "Let them think whatever they want," Denzel replied. "I'm not responsible for the way you treated me. I'm responsible for the way I respond to it." A rumble of whispered commentary traveled through the crew. This wasn't just an uncomfortable interview anymore. This was a watershed moment, the kind of scene that people talk about for years, not because of the theatrics, but because of the truth behind it. Denzel continued toward the exit, his steps measured, refusing to let the chaos behind him dictate his pace. A stagehand instinctively moved to open the door, then hesitated, unsure if stepping into the moment would make things worse. Denzel gave him a nod, a quiet thank you without speaking, and the young man pushed the door open. As the door creaked slightly, Strahan made one last attempt. "You're really gonna walk out during a live broadcast? Just like that?" Denzel stopped at the threshold, but he didn't turn around this time. His voice carried through the room, strong enough to be heard, but soft enough that listeners had to lean in. Just like that, because self-respect doesn't wait for permission. The door remained partly open, a sliver of bright hallway visible beyond the edge of the set. The studio felt dimmer by comparison. Strahan looked around helplessly, searching for support in the faces of the crew, but they offered none. They had witnessed everything. They had seen the dismissive laughs, the undermining questions, the smirks passed off as casual humor. They knew exactly how they ended up here. Denzel stepped through the doorway, leaving Michael Strahan standing alone beneath the glaring studio lights. The door didn't slam. It didn't even close quickly. It eased shut slowly, almost silently, with a finality that felt heavier than any dramatic exit could. Strahan stood motionless for several seconds, staring at the closed door like he expected it to swing back open and give him a chance to fix what he'd broken. It didn't. Behind the cameras, a producer frantically gestured for someone to cut to commercial, but their movements felt sluggish, like everyone was still trying to comprehend what had just happened. Strahan finally forced himself to look at the camera, his smile trembling around the edges. "Well, that was unexpected," he muttered, but the moment for smooth hosting had long passed. No amount of practiced charm could repair the damage. The audience had seen everything. They had watched a respected, legendary actor maintain grace under fire and walk away with dignity fully intact. They had also watched a host push too hard, mask insecurity with mockery, and watch his control crumble in front of millions. As the commercial finally rolled, Strahan sank back into his chair, staring at the empty seat across from him. For the first time all morning, morning, the reality hit him. He hadn't just lost an interview, he had exposed himself, and there was no walking away from that. If you want the next continuation in the same style, I can keep going. Strahan stayed frozen in his chair long after the commercial cut, staring at the space where Denzel had been sitting just minutes earlier. The studio around him buzzed with frantic whispers, producers arguing in hushed tones, assistants trying to figure out what segment could possibly follow the one that had just imploded live on air. Someone handed Strahan a cue card, but he barely looked at it. His mind wasn't on the next segment. It was on the fact that millions of viewers had just watched him lose control, not only of an interview, but of his own image. A producer approached cautiously. "Michael, we need you back on set in 30 seconds. Strahan didn't answer right away. He massaged his temples, trying to steady his breathing. "I didn't think he'd actually walk," he muttered under his breath, but everyone nearby heard it. The producer didn't respond. There wasn't anything safe to say. When the cameras went live again, Strahan forced a composed expression onto his face, a brittle version of his usual smooth, confident demeanor. "Welcome back," he said, forcing a breathy laugh that only made the tension more obvious. "As you saw, things got a little heated." The audience at home wasn't buying it. Neither were the people in the studio. He continued talking, filling time with empty words, but the energy in the room made every syllable sound out of place. His voice wasn't steady, and he knew it. Off camera, one of the crew members watched with a mix of sympathy and discomfort. The incident wasn't entertaining, it was painful, like watching someone realize in slow motion that they were the architect of their own undoing. Meanwhile, as Strahan struggled to hold the show together, Denzel made his way down the hallway, now far from the glare of the cameras. His steps remained calm, not hurried or angry. A few staff members stepped aside respectfully as he passed, unsure if they should speak or stay silent. He offered a polite nod to each of them, acknowledging their presence without inviting conversation. He wasn't upset with them, they hadn't disrespected him. Outside the studio, the cool air hit him like a reset button. He inhaled deeply, letting the last remnants of the tension fall away. For the first time since the interview began, he allowed himself a small exhale of relief, not because he'd escaped, but because he had stood his ground without compromising himself. A driver opened the car door for him. "Mr. Washington, everything all right?" Denzel paused before getting in, giving the man a calm, steady look. "Everything's fine," he said, "just another day." But everyone who had watched knew it wasn't just another day. Back in the studio, Strahan was now stumbling through the next segment. A cooking guest was demonstrating a recipe, but Strahan's attention was nowhere near the food. His mind kept replaying the last few minutes of the interview. Every question he thought was clever, every smirk he assumed would land, every comment he thought was harmless. They weren't harmless, and now he was learning that lesson publicly. After the show ended, the studio emptied quickly, staff rushing to meetings to discuss how to handle the fallout. Comment sections were already exploding online. Clips of the moment were being shared at lightning speed, screenshots of Denzel's expression, Strahan's dismissive laughter, the moment the microphone came off. All of it was already orbiting social media. Strahan retreated to his dressing room, slamming the door behind him. He sat in his chair, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. It dawned on him that the interview wasn't going to be remembered for the film, or for his questions, or even for the show itself. It would be remembered as the moment Denzel Washington silently dismantled his entire approach with nothing more than grace and backbone. A knock sounded on the door. "Michael," a producer called softly, "executives want to talk to you." Strahan didn't answer immediately. He knew what that meant. Damage control, explanations, meetings about tone, professionalism, audience reactions, all because he had let ego steer the interview instead of respect. Finally, he stood, straightening his jacket, preparing himself for the conversation. He wasn't afraid of consequences. He was afraid of the truth. The entire world had watched him provoke someone who hadn't deserved it, and they had also watched how a man with decades of experience and unwavering dignity chose to respond. Denzel didn't shout, he didn't insult, he didn't argue. He walked, and that walk said more than any speech could. Strahan left the dressing room slowly, realizing that while the cameras had stopped, the repercussions were only beginning. If you want, I can continue the next part seamlessly with the same intensity and style. If you like this video, then subscribe.